late Truman G. Madsen, the mother of 4, including a Navajo foster son, a grandmother of 16, and great-grandmother of 30 and counting. Well done. She loves swimming, cooking, writing, poetry, family history, and photography. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Utah, her master's degree from BYU in Ancient Studies with a minor in Hebrew. Her thesis was entitled Melchizedek, the Man and the Tradition. Can you not hear me? All right. Sorry about that. Sister Madsen has been teaching Old Testament at BYU since 1976 and has focused on Isaiah for the last 20 plus years. She also teaches courses in the New Testament. She taught these at the Jerusalem Center for Near Eastern Studies between 1987 and 1993 while living in Jerusalem. In addition to these courses, she presently teaches an honors course which she designed called Old Testament Roots of the Book of Mormon. She has written a book titled Making Their Own Peace, the stories of 12 women from present-day Jerusalem whom she interviewed while living in their city. She has completed a DVD for Deseret book entitled Opening Isaiah, in which she focuses on not fearing to open Isaiah and shares the tools to make that possible. She emphasizes that Christ is the center of Isaiah's prophecies, and not searching Isaiah keeps us from finding the sublime prophecies hidden there, unless we open Isaiah. Her church service has included Mission President's Wife in the New England Mission from 1962 to 1965, the Stake Relief Society President, and Jerusalem Branch Relief Society President. She is presently a member of the Sunday School General Board and serves as a visiting teacher. Sister Madsen.
My friend came up a little earlier and said, break a leg. And I said, that's the wrong thing to say to me. Anyway, I'm honored to present at this symposium. I love the name. The minute I saw the title, Ascending the Mountain of the Lord. Isn't that an inspiring title? I loved it. And you have pictures on the fronts of the books and on the program of this Temple of Solomon, which is what I'm going to be discussing. I wanted to say a word before I begin about Sidney Sperry. How many of you here knew him or received a patriarchal blessing from him? Anybody? Great. So I knew him quite well. He came to BYU in 1932. That was the year I was born. And he died 1 year after I began teaching here. So we crossed paths in an academic way, but beyond that, I was serving in the stake that David Yarn was the president of. I was the Stake Relief Society president, and Sidney Sperry was the patriarch. And I thought you might want to just know one thing that he said to me during that time. We used to have so much fun. It was a different venue to be at a stake meeting or to be in a ward conference with him. He said to me one day, Ann, and you know, he's a big bear of a man, those of you didn't know him. Tall and big and wonderful voice. Put his arm around me and he said, Ann, I have the best job in the church. I always dreamed that someday maybe I could be a patriarch, and the Lord has fulfilled my wish. And he was a wonderful patriarch in that stake. So it's an honor for me to be in a symposium that honors him and his name and his legacy. And I'd like to do one other just kind of quick thing. When Kent Jackson was speaking this morning, I loved the presentations this morning. I learned new things I didn't know. I hope you did as well. I'm sure you did. I couldn't help thinking as he was describing the violet windows, the violet-colored windows in Gethsemane. I went to Gethsemane once when I lived in Jerusalem, all by myself, and I knelt in prayer. I had kind of made an appointment to say to the Lord what it meant to me, what he had done in Gethsemane. And as I prayed, I finished my prayer, and I was in tears, and I walked out. There was nobody around. It's very odd to be in that place with no one around. And I thought, the last words that you spoke were poem. was a poem. Write it down. So this is what I wrote that day. So this is the segue from the last presentation to now. And I know that you've had lunch now, so just relax. And if you go to sleep, I know what it feels like to teach 2 o'clock classes. This is what I wrote on October 17th, 1976. Dear Lord Jesus, thou who lovest the people of the mosque, who would have gathered the people of the synagogue, whose arms continue open to each saffron-robed monk and searching nun, Lord of the children and the childlike, pulled by thy love, seized by thy suffering, drawn to thee by everlasting cords, I come. And I think it was Brother Skinner this morning that spoke about coming. So maybe I'm a segue to everybody this morning. I'd like to invite you to open up your little handout that came to page 24. My entire lecture is printed here, so when you go to sleep you can just look up what you missed. And there is a comparison of the footprint of Solomon's temple, which is dark, with the footprints of modern temples, the Nauvoo Temple, the Kirtland Temple, the Provo City Center Temple that is just coming into being, and the Salt Lake Temple. So the dark is Solomon's temple. On the next page is Herod's temple, only it's not the same scale as the ones on the page before. But the dark is Solomon's temple, and the light is Herod's temple, the temple from the time of Christ. Then there is a timeline showing you when each of these temples existed, and I used my little Salt Lake Temple sign for temple. I've always done that. I put it in the margins of my scriptures, but you can tell. And then the Nephi, Zarahemla, and Bountiful temples are also on this. So you'll have that to take home, and I hope that that's useful to you. I think that was all that I wanted to do kind of quickly at the beginning. Yes, it was. So now let's talk about Solomon's temple and the virtual view and assessment of its physical appearance and purpose. That was the title I gave quite a long time ago. I think I could have done something a little. Anyway, that's the title. And the building of Solomon's temple, the Temple of Solomon, marked the time when the practices of the law of Moses moved from a temporary tent of meeting, which had served as a movable temple, to a magnificent stationary home on a mountain which some believe to be Moriah, where Abraham had experienced the Akedah, the near sacrifice of his son. With Hugh Nibley, I see God as a great dramatist. What a setting for his holy house, built and dedicated by Solomon to exact dimensions given of God, in the same way that Moses received detailed plans for the tent of meeting, only double the size, exactly double the size. As we consider this temple, we are surrounded by symbols or types, as the scriptures refer to them. So let's examine that amazing building together by beginning with the tent of meeting, its half-size precursor or portable temple. The phrase tent of meeting, translated from Ochel Moed in Hebrew, is usually translated the tabernacle of the congregation in the King James Bible. It is a common phrase and appears more than 100 times in one form or another. The consensus of later translators seems to favor tent of meeting, where men or a man come to meet God, rather than a place where a group of people congregate. To illustrate, one example will suffice in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 31:14 describes the call of Joshua. Quote, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Behold, thy days approach, that thou must die. Call Joshua, and present yourselves in the tent of meeting, that I may give him a charge. And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tent of meeting." End of quote. Thus we see a meeting taking place between the Lord and his earthly leader and soon-to-be successor in the tent he had them construct for just such a purpose. A tender time is the example of Moses when the Lord commanded him to build the portable sanctuary. In Exodus 25:8 we read, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." They were living in tents, so the Lord asked for a tent, that he might tent or camp among them. In fact, the camp of Israel was organized with the tent of meeting in its center, Levite tents surrounding that, and other tribes moving out from them in all directions. It was a large camp. One obvious outcome was that the Lord moved with them when they moved, and their God's tent could be more easily defended, pitched safely at the center of their camp. When the tent of meeting gave way to a permanent home or house of the Lord, it was Solomon who was allowed to build it. Its plan was also God-given and was built in a place where he would dwell among them. They had settled in a promised land, and he settled with them. As I sought to recreate the image of that structure from my DVD opening Isaiah, I learned unexpected things which I had never supposed. I will share those with you later. I have taught and written about the Old Testament for 37 years. For more than 20 years of that time, I have specialized in teaching Isaiah. Whenever I came to Isaiah 6 to teach the call of Isaiah, I longed for images to bring my students into Solomon's temple. I used words, towering adjectives, trying to portray how it was larger than life. I used black and white photos of different areas and the tongs and other implements that figured in its ceremonies. I used color cutaway drawings and some objects, trying to find a way for these students to feel like they were walking into that magnificent building. Some of the awe of Isaiah's vision of the Lord Jehovah must have been enhanced by the setting itself. I wanted my students to feel that. My efforts were honest but fell far short of what I envisioned for them. Then I made a DVD, and I asked the producer if we could fashion a virtual Solomon's temple. It was a dream, I thought maybe. One that would be exact to the biblical measurements, which may be hyperbole, but I used the measurements that are given. I wanted them to see the magnificent gold and light it contained. Then I would see my dream realized. So some first-rate Hollywood animators took on the task, complete with smoke rising from the altars, water in the giant brass sea where the priests purified themselves, and the glittering gold interior. Incidentally, the two animators that were chosen to do this task were LDS and held temple recommends. So they were quite excited to do it. They had worked on several big-name movies with amazing special effects and results. That movie with all the blue people in it, Avatar, they worked on that one. Anybody see that? I didn't see it, but everybody told me, yeah, it was pretty good. Upon completing the task we gave them, they said it had been the most arduous and difficult they had ever tackled. So here it is with my commentary. My walking through it will give you some sense of proportion because it's all in scale. They had constructed a green environment so that they could combine the virtual they were creating with me. I was the actual. And I was walking through, there was no written script, so I was walking through a set that consisted of a green screen, a green pillar, some green steps, and a green door, seeing in my mind what I had so long hoped to share with my students. I had prayed to see it clearly and in living color that day. And I have to just say before they turn that on, it'll take 13 minutes, that I was so amazed when I saw the finished product. It did really look like what I had envisioned, and all they had to go by was the biblical account.